Welcome to your next lesson on your wedding budget. In this lesson, we'll go over budget statistics, who pays for what, how to figure out your wedding budget, some options you have to finance your wedding, and sample budgets. The national average couples spent on their wedding in 2017 was $33,391 and included a guest list of 140 people. That's not including the cost of the honeymoon. The average of couples getting married was 30 for men and 29 for women. 45% of the budget was paid for by the bride's parents, 42% was paid for by the bride and groom, and 13% was paid for by the groom's parents. The average length of the engagement was 14 months, and the most popular month for engagements was December at 16%. And remember, the biggest chunk of your budget will typically be spent on catering. So, who pays for what? Traditionally, weddings were an expense that the bride's family solely paid for. In the 21st century, both families divided the expense as their budget allowed, or they contributed a set amount of money toward the total expenses, often supplemented by the bride and groom. As the age of marriage rises, the new trend is for couples to pay for the wedding themselves. As you can see here, I've broken down, according to tradition, what the bride and the bride's family typically pays for, as well as what the groom and his family traditionally pays for. In this section of the lesson, I wanted to break down some factors you're going to want to take into consideration when beginning to figure out your wedding budget. And first, financial involvement. The first thing you're going to want to do when trying to determine your budget is to sit down with everyone who's financially involved. If your parents are helping pay for the wedding, you'll definitely want to know what their contribution will be and if it's allocated for anything specifically. If the two of you are paying for your wedding yourself, then you'll need to figure out the sources of your financial contributions, whether it be from savings, credit cards, loans, or monetary gifts you may have received. This number is always adjustable, but it gives you a good starting place since you often don't know how much things are actually going to cost. Keep in mind there may be certain elements you choose to leave out completely, like a videographer or transportation, and you may allocate those funds to another category like your wedding dress or entertainment. It's just a good idea to know approximately how much you actually have to spend up front so you can begin planning accordingly. If once you figure out your budget amount and it seems like it may be a little tight for you to incorporate everything you've been dreaming about, here is where you can knock out the big ticket items right away, like getting married during peak season, which is April through October. You can also choose to have your wedding on a Sunday or during the week. Keep in mind, not only will you have more availability with venues, but with vendors as well if you book any day besides a Friday or a Saturday. And this is because they can usually give a discount on those days of the week where they have no other weddings booked. Also, hotels and airfare is typically lower during the week too. Time of year. With spring and fall being the most popular seasons to get married, if you have your wedding in the winter or summer, you may be able to trim some money off your big ticket items as well. Keep it simple. If your budget seems tight, you can always keep it more intimate. Remember, the majority of your cost is going to be on food and beverage, so the more guests you invite, the higher your bill will be for catering. And remember, it doesn't have to be extravagant to be special. Tradition. Don't be afraid to break tradition. You don't have to get married on a Saturday evening or even on the weekend if you don't want to. You don't have to have a sit-down dinner and may even prefer hosting a brunch or a cocktail party. At the end of the day, it's your wedding and you can choose to add or remove any traditional element of it that you would like to. And one last thing to keep in mind is that if you feel you may need to work with a tight budget, give yourself some extra time. Maybe push the wedding back 6 months or even a year to allow you to save or secure additional funds for those must-have items. Now, a quick and easy way to break down and remember your budget is this. If you know what your budget is Take that amount and divide it in half to figure out how much you will need approximately for your food and beverage and venue rental. And the remaining balance is what you have to spend on the rest of the wedding. So let's break that down one step further. If you know you have a budget of $10,000 for your wedding, 50% of that, or $5,000, will need to go toward your venue, including rentals, catering, and beverages. So if you wanted to invite 50 people, you'd have a budget of $100 per person to spend. 75 people would give you about $66 per person. And 100 people will leave you with $50 per person to spend. And again, that includes your venue, rental items, catering, and beverages. So if you understand things visually like me, I created a little cheat sheet that you can take a look at to get an idea, if you know how much you have budgeted for your wedding, approximately how much you'll want to allocate toward your major expenses. So if you look here, this budget is for the average $33,000 wedding. As you can see here, 39% of your budget will go to food and beverage, about 11% to photography and videography, 8% to your wedding planner and/or day of coordinator, along with another 8% toward your ceremony and reception venue fees. And then you can expect for that 6% of that budget to go toward your ceremony and reception music, your wedding dress and accessories, as well as another 6% on your flowers and decor. You can expect 2% of your budget to go toward your invitations and stationery, your cake, your wedding rings, and transportation and parking. Then there's the 1.5% of the budget spent on favors and gifts, as well as the rehearsal dinner, and another 1% on the officiant, your hair and makeup, and the groom's tuxedo, taking into account an additional 2% for miscellaneous costs. Now, that's based on, again, a $33,000 average wedding budget. But what if you aren't having a $33,000 wedding, you ask? Well, no worries. I've broken down several different budgets for you to take a look at to use as a reference. Again, keep in mind, it's only a guideline, and you may spend more on one vendor than another if it's an important element of your wedding and you just must have it. Use it as a reference, and don't forget to adjust where necessary. So now that you have a better idea of what your budget should look like, who pays for what, and how much should be allocated for your major expenses, let's take a minute to go over some tips to help you stay on budget and save some money as well. The fewer the guests, the cheaper the wedding. Remember, everything is mostly broken down to a cost per person, so the more people, the higher the cost. At public parks and beaches, you can often have a free ceremony which could save you about 8% of your budget that you can use elsewhere if need be. If you have an afternoon wedding or even do a brunch menu, the cost of the venue and catering can decrease significantly. If your family is full of good cooks, you could save a ton of money by asking everyone to bring a covered dish to share and have a potluck-style catering. You can completely cut out the cost of transportation by choosing a reception venue that is close to your ceremony and guest accommodations. If you know how to make your own cake, you can save another 2% of your budget by making it yourself or asking a skilled friend or family member to make it for you. Instead of hiring a photographer or videographer, you could always save that 11% of your budget and ask your guests to upload their candid photos and videos to your wedding website. Also, if you happen to have a friend or family member that is good with technology and an iPad, you could always create your own playlist and rent some speakers to play your own music through an iPod or iPad instead of having live music from your ceremony and reception. Just remember, if you choose this route, you'll want to make sure you delegate someone to start and stop the music when you need it, like during toasts and speeches, the cutting of the cake, etc. You can save around another 4 to 5% of your budget just by renting your wedding gown or buying one at a thrift store at a seriously discounted price. The more the decor you can make yourself, the more you'll save. And with the exception of the actual invitation and the thank you card, you can save quite a bit of money by sending everything out electronically to your guests. Another option that can shave a few $1,000s off the budget is to consider purchasing cheaper wedding rings now that you can always have upgraded later. If you're looking to go on a nice honeymoon but funds are low because of all the wedding expenses, you can always have a honeymoon fund listed on your gift registry in lieu of gifts, and your guests can donate that money towards your honeymoon fund. If you're planning to use a credit card to put most of the wedding expenses on, you'll want to make sure that you take out a card that could be multi-purpose, like earning cash back and airline miles, so those honeymoon flight tickets can almost be free. And lastly, you can save a few $100s on your hair and makeup if you learn to do it yourself through an online tutorial or a class, or if you ask a friend or family member to do it for you.